Welcome to the Fundamentals of the Mental Game with Dr. Brett, and I'm Dr. Brett. Meditation, mindfulness, visualization, and breathwork. The power of being present. The first fundamental principle in the fundamentals of the mental game. Followed by the power of patience, the power of poise, the power of perseverance, and the power of perspective. But let's come back to the first one. Presence. That's the essence of what makes people good at pretty much anything. Being in the present moment as much as possible. What does that take? It takes a lot of mental game training, not a little bit, a lot. And some people are better at it than others, but we can all improve. These are this has been around for 2,500 years. This is what the Buddha was teaching. And on some level, Jesus Christ was teaching this as well. Being in the here and now, that's what gives you the healing powers, right? The intuitive ability. What is meditation? It's just a vehicle to train the mind. This morning, I was sitting in a meditative state for 45 minutes. It was lovely. I've done somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 hours in my lifetime. What does it give me? It gives me the capacity to be more present, even under pressure, and to stay, of course, more poised as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit going forward here, right? So meditation, mindfulness, visualization, breath work. We want to meditate. It decreases neurological activity in the amygdala, the part of the mind, or the part of the brain, actually, that's responsible for emotions like anxiety and fear and anger and so on. And it increases neurological activity in the left prefrontal cortex where happiness exists on a neurological level. So what is meditation doing? It's changing our nervous system. It's changing our neuronal structure here. Over time, it has profound impacts on health, longevity, on peacefulness, on a more tranquil mind, on performance in sports, on performance in business, on performance in relationships. We're more present, we're more empathic, we're more engaged. The more present we are, the more trained our mind is. Mindfulness practice is simply paying attention to your mind. Where is it throughout the day? Where is it? Is it in the future? Is it in the past? The future usually is anxiety-provoking for most people. And the past is usually some form of regret. Now, I'm not saying we don't want to spend some time planning, that's the future, or some time visualizing or occasionally fantasizing. It is what it is. But for the most part, we want to bring our focus back into the moment. And that's the same for the past, right? Sometimes the past is nice to reminisce, but for the most part, the real horsepower of living and performance comes from the here and now. You want to hit 350, you want to hit 300, you got to be in the present moment, right? You got a half a second with that baseball or less. Visualization is super powerful because the mind doesn't always know the difference. The brain doesn't always know the difference between what you're doing in your meditative state and your visualization and in your mind's eye, so to speak, and what's happening in reality. So you get a lot of freaking practice that way. Almost every Olympian, they do a lot of visualization. Most of the pro athletes I work with, they all do a ton of visualization. Pretty much, I'm sure almost every golfer does. Like I'm talking about PGA Tour or Web.com or Korn Ferry, some of the mini tours, right? Like this is the way to get there. There's so much competition that if you don't train your mind, you're going to be behind. Now let's talk about patience now. Oh, before we got to get to breath work. Breath work's super powerful. I have almost everybody do some version of Wim Hof, right? It doesn't have to be Wim Hof. There are other forms of breath work, but it's basically a way of oxygenating the tissue and resetting our mood and our focus and giving you more horsepower over time, right? Because when we do a lot of breath work, we get really centered and we get a little bit stronger physiologically. We get stronger mentally, right? We become more in the here and now. There's simple techniques like fire breathing to pick up your energetic state. There's the box breathing, 4 or 5 seconds in, 4 or 5 second hold, 4 or 5 second release, followed by a 4 or 5 second hold. And then you get chill, relax. If you do that a lot, it takes your anxiety down, especially if you got to perform. I've coached every kind of athlete, including opera singers, right? They use this to calm down before a performance, right? Because they're nervous, they got to get on stage, right? So you can do it for an actor. I've coached all kinds of actors in the past, not just top athletes and regular athletes, right? So, we want to work on the fundamentals of the mental game here, the power of being present, the meditation, the mindfulness, the visualization, the breath work, super powerful. The second fundamental principle is patience, right? The power of being patient. The more patient we are, the more we slow it down, the more we get in the here and now, the better we listen, the better we communicate, the better we think things through, the more creative we get. Why is that? Well, we're more patient, and we're more patient, we can go deeper, right? We can develop things. Think about hitting a baseball. It requires patience, right? You got to wait for the right pitch. You can't just swing at anything, right? Think about a golf, being on a golf course and competing. If you get impatient, you speed up your routine, you're probably going to screw up your shot, right? Or your stroke, or whatever it is. Same thing with basketball, right? Even though it's a fast sport, a microsecond of patience can make all the difference in the world between taking the open shot and making the pass and making a decision. So we want to work on being more and more patient. How do we do that? We intentionally work on slowing it down. We can do that everywhere. Now, when we're slowing our mind down, we're meditating a lot, right? Or we're breathing a lot, so it's all interconnected. But when you listen really well, you're being more patient, right? And you're developing your athletic ability by actually being more patient, right? By listening. And then, communicating understanding is invaluable in relationships. Well, how do we get good at that? We get more patient, right? Understanding takes patience. It's really easy to jump and get judgmental. But when we're super in the present moment and we're super patient, right? We're going to listen better and we're going to understand more. And we're also going to learn how to think things through, right? Bad decision making a lot of times is impatience, right? Or it's related to it. And then, of course, the creativity comes when we're so in the here and now, right? The more in the here and now we are, and the more patient we are, the more we can develop other parts of ourselves, our creative side, and so on. The third principle is the power of poise, and that's like part of putting this thing together, right? You want to hit a baseball, you want to play really well at golf, you want to be good in relationships, you got to be more poised. You want to handle stress and pressure. Poise is fundamental. I always tell this funny story about how I was on an airplane coming back from Bangkok, to LAX. This was 8 years ago, and my wife asked me in the middle of the night to get some orange juice. No good deed goes unpunished, because I got us 2 orange juices, and then the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, and it felt like, it dropped 10 feet. In reality, it's probably a foot or two, but I went flying off the ground, and somebody screamed. And then the rest of the plane screamed, but that first person screamed because he got a pocket of OJ from me. I landed on my feet. I was, I'm a pretty good athlete here, pretty coordinated, and I walked calmly down the hall. Everybody started panicking because the turbulence got so bad. People were screaming, and I smiled at my wife, buckled my seat or whatever, and handed her this much orange juice. And then I gave her mine, of course. But the playful metaphor is, staying poised in all kinds of situations. I saved my cousin's life by staying poised in a high-mech maneuver situation, right? So there's been so many stories and instances of this on golf courses, in competition, and so on. Poise is invaluable, right? So we want to work on that by being more present, by being more patient, by being more poised, right? And in this process of poise, we're developing more self-awareness, self-discipline, self-control, and we're moving away from things like self-sabotage, right? Because almost all of us at certain times in our life are going to run self-sabotage programs, and that fucks with self-trust, as we all know. All right, the fourth principle is perseverance. The athletes I work with, most of them, and the entrepreneurs, most of them persevere. I persevere. Some people persevere better than others. You can work on it. It's a muscle. It's not always easy, but it's invaluable. But in this process of persevering, it's super important to recognize cul-de-sacs, dead ends, right? You don't want to persevere into a dead end, into a cul-de-sac. That's when you need to pivot and make a better decision. Now, how do you do that? Well, the more present you are, the more patient you are, the more poised you are, then the better decision you're going to make around perseverance, because most of the time perseverance is invaluable, right? Because that's how we become successful. We stick with it, we learn from our mistakes, and we overcome our fear, and we recognize dead ends, and and we more or less never give up, except when it's a cul-de-sac, a dead end, and then we pivot and we switch gears. So we're working on perseverance as a muscle that we can build and build and build. And of course, the last principle is the power of perspective, and perspective is invaluable, right? So many people like freak out and panic over little shit. And it wasn't, like I say, pancreatic cancer. It wasn't a car accident. You lose a loved one. You weren't diagnosed with something terminal, right? And even if you were, if you don't stay poised, you're probably not going to be able to fight it well or address it well, right? So we want to stay poised, and that is related to perspective. And keep in mind, it's never over till it's over. There's almost always another opportunity. And then, of course, we need to find a way to make it fun. Because if we don't make it fun, what's this thing about? Now, there are times in life I went through a serious health crisis where I was severely ill for over a year. It wasn't fun. But I did my best to persevere. And then, of course, it starts to get fun again. And then we have gratitude. And the more we live with gratitude, the better we are at every aspect of life, but especially relationships. Because when we're grateful, we appreciate it, people appreciate us, and we go further and we enjoy the process more and more and more. Hey, I'm Dr. Brett, and as always, if you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe and share. Thank you.